That heavy, suffocating silence you're carrying right now. The kind that makes your own thoughts echo like accusations in an empty cathedral, is not your life falling apart. It is the sound of your old life detonating, so that the masterpiece you were always meant to be can finally and permanently rise from the ashes. This is not abandonment. This is demolition before construction of the divine. Let's speak the truth you feel in your bones, the ghost town of your social calendar, the notifications that never come, the way you've become a spectator to other people's connected lives through a screen, while your own world feels airless and still. Society has trained you to interpret this quiet as the ultimate failure. You are unlovable. You are boring. You are fundamentally broken. But what if every single thing you've been taught about loneliness is a malicious lie designed to keep you small and seeking? What if this crushing solitude is the most precious gift your soul could ever receive? What if the people who walked away, the invitations that dried up, the sense of being forgotten, what if they weren't losses, but careful, deliberate extractions performed by the surgical hands of your own deepest wisdom? A wisdom that knows you are ripe for a transformation so radical it can only occur in the total, terrifying, and sacred vacuum of being utterly alone with yourself. Today, we embark on the deepest of journeys. This is not motivation. This is psychological archaeology. We will excavate and illuminate the 7 non-negotiable strata of metamorphosis that occur when you are stripped bare of every external reference point. This is the precise cartography of moving from a human being drowning in the feeling of abandonment to a human being who has become the unshakable gravitational center of a universe that now orbits you. Your rise will not come from a rescue party. It will come from the earth-shattering realization that you were never in the hole you thought you were. Layer 1. The unconscious extraction. Your psyche's life-saving surgery. We begin with a foundational truth that will change your entire relationship with your pain. In the moments you feel most desperately alone, you may actually be in the safest possible hands. Your own. This is the stage of the unconscious extraction. Your conscious mind, the anxious social self that fears exclusion above all else, processes solitude as emergency, as rejection, as proof of defect. But your unconscious mind, the vast, ancient, and infinitely intelligent 90% of your psyche that operates on the logic of species survival and soul evolution, may be performing emergency surgery. Carl Jung's revolutionary insight was that the psyche is a self-regulating ecosystem. When your conscious life, your relationships, career path, daily identity becomes chronically misaligned with the deep archetypal blueprint of your soul, the unconscious intervenes with the subtlety of a tectonic plate. It doesn't negotiate, it reorganizes. How does this reorganization feel? It feels like friction where there was once flow. It feels like meaning draining from rituals that once defined you. It feels like bonds you thought were titanium, suddenly becoming brittle and dissolving in your hands. You experience this as a cascade of losses. But from the vantage point of your soul's evolution, this is a strategic, life-saving amputation. You are not being thrown overboard. You are being removed from a ship that is on a direct, unmappable course for a reef that would destroy you. Imagine a master sculptor standing before a flawed but precious piece of marble. Veins of weak stone run through it, threatening the integrity of the future statue. The sculptor's first act is not to carve the face, but to take a hammer and chisel and, with brutal precision, knock off large compromised sections. To the marble, this is violence, destruction, a reduction. To the sculptor, it is the only possible act of love, making the future masterpiece possible. Your unconscious is that sculptor. The relationships that end, the social identities that crumble, they are those veins of weak stone. The hammer blows feel like heartbreak. They are. But they are the heartbreak that precedes wholeness. I recall the story of a man named Thomas, who built his entire identity as the guy who could fix anything in his large, demanding family. His worth was his utility. When a chronic illness slowly rendered him unable to perform this role, he experienced not just physical pain, but social extinction. The calls for help stopped. The visits dwindled. He was plunged into what felt like a humiliating and worthless void. For 18 months, he marinated in this bitter silence, convinced he had been deemed obsolete. Then, one afternoon, too weary even for self-pity, he stared out his window at an oak tree. He noticed not its strength, but its stillness, how it simply existed, without fixing anything. A memory, utterly unrelated, surfaced of being 5 years old, completely content for hours, arranging colored pebbles in patterns only he understood. A self that needed no audience, no problem to solve, to feel utterly real. That forgotten boy was his soul's original signature. The social role he lost wasn't his purpose. It was a prison he had mistaken for a palace. His illness was not a curse that took his world away. It was the key that unlocked the door to a world that was truly his. He began to write small, observational essays about the nature of stillness. They became a book. The silence he thought would kill him became the ink in his pen. This first layer demands a complete reframe. Stop asking, why is everyone leaving me? Start asking, what future, more authentic self is this solitude creating space for? What false version of me is being mercifully dismantled? The pain is not the pain of death. It is the violent, glorious pain of a metamorphosis. Layer 2, the deconstruction of the false self, when the mask crumbles to dust. Once the extraction is underway, a more intimate and terrifying unraveling begins. With the external world of feedback and validation withdrawn, the intricate internal costume you spent a lifetime stitching together starts to fray at the seams. This is the deconstruction of the false self, the dissolution of the entire persona complex. From your first breath, you were handed scripts and costumes. The easy baby costume, the student armor, the rebel without a cause leather jacket, the reliable friend uniform, the successful professional suit. Jung called this adaptive layer the persona, the mask you present to the world to secure safety, love, and belonging. You wore it so well, for so long, that the mask fused to your skin. You believed the painted smile was your own. The rehearsed lines were your true voice. Solitude turns off all the lights in the theater. In the profound dark, with no audience to gasp or applaud, the mask becomes oppressive. It itches. It stifles your breath. In the silence, you hear the faint, desperate voice of the face beneath it, and you begin, finger by trembling finger, to pry it off. What is revealed is raw, undefined, and psychologically naked. This is the ontological crisis, the terrifying confrontation with the question, if I am not my roles, my achievements, my relationships, then what? In God's name, am I? You may scan your bookshelf and realize you curated it to signal intelligence, not to feed your curiosity. You may examine your political beliefs and find they are heirlooms from your family, not convictions forged in your own conscience. You may stand in a grocery aisle, trying to choose a tea, and be paralyzed by the realization that you have no idea what you genuinely like, only what you've always bought. This is not a mental health crisis. It is the ultimate mental health procedure. It is the ego's controlled demolition so the true self can be excavated from the rubble. Consider Anya, a woman whose identity was a magnificent cathedral built to honor mother. She was the pinnacle of nurturing, the architect of perfect childhoods, her worth measured in her children's happiness. When her youngest left for college, the cathedral became a silent, echoing museum. The persona of ultimate mother had no one to mother. In the hollow quiet, a stranger emerged in the mirror. A woman with sharp, unmaternal opinions. A woman who was bored by domesticity. A woman with a latent, fierce artistic drive. she had suppressed for decades as selfish. This woman terrified the mother persona. She felt like a monster, a failure. But this monster was her authentic self, the self that existed before motherhood defined her. The deconstruction of mother was not the destruction of Anya. It was the long-delayed birth of the individual, named Anya. She began to paint, large, chaotic, brilliant canvases. Her world shrank in size but expanded into infinite depth. The deconstruction of the false self is an act of breathtaking courage. It means standing in the naked truth of your being, stripped of every accolade, every role, every label that once told you who you were. It is mortifying, and it is the most dignified, sovereign act a human can undertake. You cannot discover your true kingdom while kneeling in the costume of a servant. Layer 3. The Shadowlands. Meeting the exiled parliament of your soul. With the social mask removed, you stand at the mouth of the cave. This is your descent into the Shadowlands. The non-negotiable confrontation with everything you have spent your life denying, repressing, and pretending does not exist within you. Jung's shadow is not a metaphor for evil. It is the entire parliament of your disinherited self. Every trait, impulse, desire, and capacity that your conscious personality, your now crumbled persona, deemed unacceptable, dangerous, shameful, or too potent, your volcanic rage, your bottomless neediness, your calculating ambition, your spiritual pride, your anarchic creativity, your paralyzing fear, your ecstatic sensuality. You didn't delete these parts. You betrayed them. You cast them into the inner wilderness. And now, in the echoing silence of your solitude, they are marching back to the capital, demanding their rightful seat at the table of your psyche. This stage feels like psychological civil war. You thought you were moving toward peace, and now you're besieged by envy so green it tastes like bile, resentment you thought you'd buried, judgmental thoughts that shock you with their cruelty, or a sorrow so vast it feels oceanic. This is not you coming undone. This is your wholeness coming together. Your exiled selves are returning home, and they are arriving traumatized, angry, and hungry for recognition. The shadow is not your enemy. It is wild, untamed potential. It is the locked armory of your full power. Your task is not to defeat these aspects in battle, but to hear their testimonies. That roaring voice of rage, it holds the sacred fire you need to burn down the bridges to your own exploitation. That whimpering voice of neediness, it holds the map to the childhood wounds that need your adult compassion. That voice of arrogant ambition, it holds the rocket fuel for your destiny. Mythology is our sacred text here. Every hero's journey requires a descent. Inanna shedding her royal robes at each gate to the underworld. Odysseus pouring blood to speak to the dead. Psyche sorting impossible mountains of seeds. These are allegories for the interior work that cannot be delegated. You cannot send your polite social self into the Shadowlands. It will be eaten alive. You must go in armed only with ruthless honesty and a willing heart. A man I'll call David, a celebrated diplomat known for his unflappable calm and compromise, entered a catastrophic depression after a peace deal he brokered collapsed. In the wreckage, alone in a foreign hotel room, he was possessed by fantasies of violent reprisal and a contempt for humanity so deep it shook him to his core. He believed he was having a psychotic break. In truth, he was having a psychic breakthrough. The diplomat persona had required him to lock away his righteous anger, his moral absolutism, his capacity for fierce defense. The shadow was not destroying the diplomat. It was resurrecting the whole man, a man who could not only negotiate but could also say, with moral authority, this far, and no further. This integration later allowed him to broker deals with a new, formidable strength that commanded respect, not just accommodation. When you cease viewing your darkness as a demon to be exorcised, and start welcoming it as a lost, wounded part of your own soul. You begin the alchemical process of turning raw trauma into timeless wisdom. This layer is the crucible. It is where you are melted down to your essential elements. It is agonizing, holy, and the only path to genuine, unborrowed power. You cannot claim your crown while disowning the throne room of your own darkness. Layer 4. The dawn of inner sovereignty. The self claims its throne. Having survived the descent and reclaimed your disowned parliament, a new power structure emerges from the psychic rubble. This is the dawn of inner sovereignty. You are no longer a colony of other people's opinions. You declare independence and become the absolute monarch of your own interior kingdom. Sovereignty is not narcissism. It is the quiet, bone-deep realization that you, and you alone, hold the final veto and the ultimate seal of approval over your own life. Your choices cease to be complex equations of external approval and become simple somatic responses to an inner truth meter. A yeses feels like a door swinging open in your chest, a flow of energy, a sense of the universe nodding. A no feels like a portcullis slamming shut in your gut, a draining of vitality, a biological recoil. For decades, you overrode these signals to earn love, avoid conflict, or stay safe. In the absolute sovereignty of your solitude, you are forced to rediscover this native language, and critically, to obey it. The neuroscience of this is profound. When the constant noise of social feedback is removed, the brain's medial prefrontal cortex, the seat of self-referential thought, and the anterior insula, which internal bodily states, strengthen their connection. Your brain literally rewires to become exquisitely sensitive to your own internal state, prioritizing it over social cues. You become biologically loyal to yourself. The story of Lena embodies this shift. A prodigy violinist from age 6, she walked away from a sure-shot soloist career at 22 to become a lawyer, fulfilling a family promise made by her immigrant parents. She was spectacularly successful and profoundly dead inside. When her father, the last living source of this external mandate, passed away, she was unmoored. The grief was a canyon, but in its depths, she found a terrifying freedom. One night, she took her old violin from its case. As she drew the bow across the strings, a sound emerged, not of technique, but of a soul weeping with joy. The visceral, full-body yes was undeniable. Choosing to return to music, to sell her firm, to face the confusion of her family, this was her declaration of independence. It was the first sovereign act of her adult life. My inner truth is the highest law I serve. She now plays not in concert halls, but in hospitals and prisons, where music is not performance, but medicine. Her life is less prestigious, but every cell in her body sings in alignment. With sovereignty, you interact with the world from a place of election, not desperation. You give from abundance, not deficit. You become, as the Stoics envisioned, the captain of your own soul. The helm answers to your touch alone. Layer 5. The principle of resonant reorganization. Your universe bends to your new frequency. From the throne of your inner sovereignty, you begin to witness a fundamental law of reality operating with elegant, undeniable force. The principle of resonant reorganization. This is the phase where your external reality begins to reorder itself, not through sweat and struggle, but through the invisible mathematics of vibrational alignment. Like iron filings leaping to arrange themselves around a magnet, the people, opportunities, and circumstances of your life begin to move into a new configuration that mirrors your inner state of coherence. This is quantum psychology, not wishful thinking. Every thought, emotion, and belief you hold has a specific vibrational signature. When you are internally at war versus shadow, duty versus desire, you emit a dissonant, chaotic frequency. You attract instability, misunderstanding, and stagnant situations. because they are a match for your inner chaos. When you achieve inner coherence through integration and sovereignty, you emit a pure, strong signal. You naturally repulse what is dissonant and attract what is resonant. The process follows an immutable spiritual sequence: release, void, attraction. First, the release of the old layers 1-3. Then, the surrender to the void, the fertile emptiness of not knowing the core of the solitary experience. Finally, attraction, the universe, abhorring a vacuum, fills it with patterns that sympathize with your new vibrational signature. You do not manifest a soulmate by making a list. You become the whole, sovereign person for whom a deep, mature partnership is the natural, harmonious next step. A man who integrates his shadow of aggression and channels it into passionate, purposeful work will find competitive, dynamic collaborators miraculously appearing. A woman who sheds her caretaker persona and embraces her need for solitude will find her world gracefully making space for her. With people who respect her boundaries without being asked. Study the lives of history's transformative figures. Viktor Frankl's years in the concentration camps were an extreme, involuntary solitude. In that hell, he forged a psychological stance, finding meaning in any circumstance that was of such pure, coherent frequency that upon release, it resonated with the post-war world's search for purpose, birthing logotherapy. His inner state magnetized his life's work. For you, this may look like accidental meetings that feel fated, ideas arriving in perfect synchronicity, or solutions presenting themselves with an ease that feels like grace. Your work is not to manipulate these outcomes, but to maintain the pristine clarity and integrity of your inner kingdom. The reorganization is a law of nature. It will proceed on its own. Layer 6. The symphony of synchronicity, when the cosmos starts whispering your name. Living from this place of resonant coherence sharpens your perception to a preternatural degree. You begin to notice the universe speaking to you in a language of meaningful coincidence. This is the stage of synchronicity, Jung's term for those moments when an inner psychological state and an outer event mirror each other in a way that feels charged with meaning, yet connected by meaning, not causality. You have a dream of a black dog, and on your morning walk, a black dog follows you home. You are wrestling with a line of poetry, and a stranger on the subway is reading a book with that exact line on the cover. You make a difficult decision based on inner truth, and an unexpected check arrives covering the exact amount of a looming bill. These are not random events. They are synchronistic winks, cosmic affirmations that whisper, you are in the flow. You are hearing the music. Jung proposed that these events point to a unitary reality behind the apparent separation of psyche and matter, the unus mundus. In states of deep inner alignment, which the trial by fire of solitude can produce, the veil between subjective and objective thins, and we glimpse this underlying unity. Picture yourself as a radio telescope. Before your inner work, you were pointed at the noisy static of the city. Competing signals, interference, the hum of society. Now in the deep silence of your own being, you have rotated your dish toward the deep field of the cosmos. You are tuned to the faint, beautiful signals from distant stars. Synchronicities are those signals. Proof you are listening to the right channel, the channel of cosmic intelligence. Their psychological purpose is sublime. They annihilate existential loneliness. They transform a sterile, mechanistic universe into a living, communicative, and intimate cosmos. In the heart of your solitude, this is the ultimate revelation. You are not a lonely monologue. You are part of an eternal, meaningful dialogue. To engage this layer, adopt the stance of a poet or a detective of the divine. Keep a journal of these God incidences. Don't dissect them, savor them. Their primary gift is not to grant wishes, but to provide incontrovertible evidence that you are woven into a living tapestry of meaning. Layer 7. The inner citadel. the imperishable sanctuary. All layers culminate in this final, serene destination, the construction of the inner citadel. This is not a lonely fortress of isolation. It is an impenetrable sanctuary of self-completion, a psychological structure of such profound peace and self-trust that external events, praise or criticism, companionship or solitude, success or failure, can no longer storm its gates. You have become your own eternal home. The citadel is built with the materials forged in each layer, the space carved by extraction, the authenticity won in deconstruction, the power reclaimed in the shadowlands, the authority declared in sovereignty, the order established by resonance, and the faith affirmed by synchronicity. It is the fully integrated self-sustaining psyche. Within this citadel, your relationship to solitude completes its ultimate, beautiful inversion. It is no longer a state of lack to be feared, but the default state of your power. Your inner throne room. You no longer crave constant external stimulation because you have discovered the infinite complexity, creativity, and companionship of your own soul. You become your own most profound teacher, your most loyal confidant, your own source of unconditional love. The philosopher king Marcus Aurelius, who governed the Roman Empire from the chaos of military campaigns, wrote his meditations not in a palace, but in the solitary confines of his tent. His citadel was within. Nowhere can you retreat more completely, more peacefully, than into your own soul. He wrote, his sanctuary was portable, impervious, and the source of his legendary equanimity. A modern archetype is the scientist Jane Goodall. Her foundational breakthrough in understanding chimpanzees did not come in a crowded lab, but in the profound, patient solitude of the Gombe forest. In that deep observational silence, free from the noise of academic theory, she built an inner citadel of direct perception and intuition that allowed her to see what others had missed for centuries. Her solitude was not a barrier to connection. It was the very lens that allowed for a revolutionary connection with another species. When you dwell in your inner citadel, you engage with life from a place of profound, untouchable choice. You love others not from hunger, but from the overflow of a cup that is always full. You work not to prove your worth, but as an organic expression of your soul's imperative. You are no longer a leaf in the social wind. You are the tree, deeply rooted, seasonally changing, and defining your own landscape. Epilogue. The sacred crucible of alone. Look back on the map we have charted. The silence you thought would suffocate you was the womb of your rebirth. The loneliness you cursed was the refiner's fire for your spirit. Every departure was a divine subtraction. Every empty hour was a brushstroke on the canvas of your becoming. This is the sacred crucible of alone, the alchemical process by which the base metal of perceived abandonment is transmuted into the gold of unassailable self-possession. You did not lose your way in the dark. You were given the only map that leads to the treasure, the one etched on the walls of your own soul. So, the next time the quiet descends like a velvet curtain, I invite you to breathe into it. Listen past the old story of lack. Beneath it, you will hear the steady, powerful rhythm of your own sovereign heart. You will feel the granite foundations of your inner citadel, settled and eternal. You are not being abandoned. You are being anointed. The universe isn't leaving you with no one. It is clearing the entire stage, dimming every light, and waiting in hushed reverence for the solo performance that was always the main event. The breathtaking, unedited, magnificent revelation of you. If this deep immersion has given voice to the transformation stirring in your bones, if it has lit a lantern on your solitary path, then be a bearer of this light. Share it with one other pilgrim in the quiet. And if you wish to continue this expedition into the architecture of meaning, the psychology of wholeness, then join this community. Subscribe. The journey inward is infinite, and it is traveled best with fellow cartographers of the soul. Let this be your covenant, the relationship you nurture with yourself in the holy silence of your own being is the foundational covenant for every other experience of your life. Build it with reverence, fortify it with truth, and dwell within it as the sovereign of your own sacred destiny.